putting the motion to the Synod this morning in about half an hour's time. Nigel Holmes, he used to be a BBC radio producer up at Radio Cumbria. You're complaining that religious coverage on television used to be exemplary, but that the programmes that remain, the few programmes that remain, are now marginalised. Are there really so few programmes?
Well, the thing that prompted me to move this motion was the lack of coverage altogether on Good Friday last year, and a number of people commented on that. I think that is one symptom of a change that's taken place probably over 20 years, so that although there are probably just about as many programmes on BBC television now as there were then, there are far fewer on ITV, hardly any at all. The BBC proportion, because the number of general programmes has doubled in that time, is now less. And the programmes which were once made, like Every Man and Hard to the Matter, good quality documentary programmes, don't seem to be being made. Yet surely at the moment we are crying out for an ethical and a moral slant on so many issues around, both at home and abroad. At home, finance and politics. Abroad, the faith dimension is entering ever more into the journalistic agenda.
But does this reflect the fact that religion no longer has, particularly the Anglican religion, no longer has the centrality of British society that it had, say, 20, 30, 40 years ago?
That inevitably is true, but still the numbers are very significant. That 1.7 million people worship in a Church of England church every month, more than that in all the other Christian denominations combined, and then probably something like 10 times that number who would call themselves Christian. And also, of course, our culture is imbued with Christianity. Our institutions very much have Christian principles at their heart. So I think it's very important that we do keep this flame of religion alive. And I'm not saying it's Christianity alone, it's religion generally that needs to be covered better than it is at the moment, more prominently.
The BBC says it broadcast 164 hours of religious programming on television last year. As you say, ITV virtually none. That is a slight increase, and the BBC argues that you should consider not quantity, not how many programmes, but how good they are. There was a headline in the Church Times the other day, never mind the quantity, never mind the width, feel the quality. Do you not have some sympathy with that argument?
Some sympathy perhaps, but as I say, the percentage has just about halved in the 20 years, so it's hard to get too much enthusiasm for that argument. And I would say one area that is lacking is religious current affairs. You used to have the Heaven and Earth show, which did that to a degree. The Sunday programme on Radio 4 gets 1 million listeners a week. Why is there nothing comparable on BBC television?
Okay, Nigel Holmes, thank you very much. We must let you get inside the Synod to propose your motion at 10 o'clock. The Synod will be debating that. Many divisive issues discussed at the Synod this week, but I suspect this is one on which many members will agree. Back to you.
So this is just a straight interview.
Okay, can you just give me your name and position for the camera?
Nigel Holmes, member of the General Synod from faraway Carlisle.
Just a second. Okay, can you just tell me a little bit about the motion that you proposed this morning?
The motion is designed really to draw attention to what has been happening in religious broadcasting across the mainstream channels in recent years. ITV virtually withdrawing from religious broadcasting, question marks over Channel 4. And in terms of the BBC, there is still a presence of religious broadcasting there in television, not as good as BBC radio. We're trying in a sense to chivvy the BBC up. Perhaps the BBC Trust might become a little bit more interventionist and put religious broadcasting back to a greater extent in the mainstream rather than marginalising, which I feel it's done in recent years. And in percentage terms, it has halved in the last 20 years the proportion of BBC general programme time that is devoted to religion.
Why do you think it's important that there is a presence on broadcasting of religious programmes?
I think it's important that people are made aware of the strength of faith in the country, that we still have 1.7 million people who worship every month in the Church of England, more than twice that if you bring in other Christian denominations, and probably 10 times that cumulative total of people who call themselves Christian. And of course our culture is imbued with Christianity, our national institutions are very much based on Christian principles, and I think there is an intrinsic interest there too, because good religious programmes, well produced, effectively scheduled, do actually gain audience for their time slot. That's been proved time and time again.
Are you pleased with the amendment?
I was happy with the amendment. I mean, it's always a matter of judgment as to quite how you phrase these things. I think Nigel McCulloch is very well experienced in handling broadcasting issues in the House of Lords, and so I felt that he probably would be able to phrase it in the way that was likely to have best effect.
Okay. Can you tell me specifically what it is you don't like about the way that religious broadcasting has changed over the years?
I think there is the marginalisation of programmes, and you can get into a downward spiral if programmes are given less good time slots. As a result of that, they won't attract such big audiences. Songs of Praise is an example, that its slot moves around, it gets ever earlier before the news rather than the inherited audience afterwards. And if programmes are put on at marginal times, they don't attract the audience, then the budget probably gets reduced and you get into a downward spiral. I would hope really that the effect of today is to make the BBC prize religious television rather than regard it as a problem.
Is there anything about the portrayal of Christianity on television in particular that concerns you?
Points that were made in the debate, I think, related particularly in relation to the way in which people who express a faith are portrayed in comedy programmes. I think actually in terms of news and current affairs coverage, or news coverage we do quite well. Current affairs coverage I think in radio is very good, where the Sunday programme actually attracts an audience of about 1 million people, which indicates that there is a demand for it. But since the Heaven and Earth show finished, there is no comparable outlet on BBC television, and I think that really is a loss.
Can you just elaborate a bit about your point about comedy?
I can't really, because honestly I don't know enough about the subject to be able to comment satisfactorily on it. I probably tend not to watch those kinds of programmes.
Okay, but are you saying that Christianity is portrayed as something funny or odd?
All I'm saying is that there was a perception within the debate that those who are Christians, say clergy, are portrayed as not effective, perhaps in various ways, as characters of fun. There is also the argument, I think, which is that the boundaries of comedy have been pushed back to such an extent that quite a bit of what appears on the air is not exactly the kind of thing that is actually enriching.
All right. Is there any way in which your concerns about religious programming is contributing to the secularisation of society? What I mean is, sorry, I'll rephrase that question. If you're concerned about the amount of religious programmes that are available across all the networks, is the fact that perhaps they might not be the same quality as they used to be, or there might not be as many of them or as many hours, is that contributing to an idea that Britain is more a secular nation than a Christian nation?
I don't think the amount of television coverage is actually going to make a huge difference to whether people choose to believe or not. I think it's a question of how effectively people are informed.
12, he has not all attendance.
Mr. Chairman, 10 years ago on Leap Year Day 2000, I introduced a private demonstration on religious broadcasting. They just brought out is that there were a number that I didn't know who come to the debate and inform in the way that you have done. So thank you very much indeed for that.